preaching today, which is awesome. Fresh faces are always great, and I'm really excited because one of my favorite folks to converse with in this church is Bernie. I love to listen to Bernie talk about scripture. Bernie's got his doctorate, and he's going to drop some knowledge on us. So let's all give it up for Bernie. He's going to come up and share some wisdom with us.
All right, get ready for a little heresy.
That's how we like it.
The great naturalist and writer Henry David Thoreau declared in 1853 that he was born to be a pantheist. Like Thoreau, I consider myself a pantheist because I worship the cosmos and the natural laws that are embedded in it as God. I resonate with Frank Lloyd Wright's declaration, I believe in God, only I spell it nature. I've referred to myself here during discussion periods as an atheistic Christian pantheist. I use the words atheistic and Christian to elaborate and describe my particular type of pantheism. Today, I'm going to set my pantheism aside, though, and concentrate on the atheistic and Christian in my self-description. As a social scientist that occasionally lectures on the phenomenon of American religion, I often ask my listeners if they have heard of Christian atheism. Most have not. In fact, many imagine that these two words just don't go together. However, the concept of Christian atheism is not actually a new one. One of the famed four horsemen of the new atheism, Christopher Hitchens, argued that Thomas Jefferson was a Christian atheist. While Jefferson was always somewhat cagey and vague about exactly what he believed, a pretty strong case for Hitchens' assessment of him can be made. These are images of Jefferson's Bible. In 1820, he created his own version of the Gospels by literally cutting out the passages that he thought attributable to the historical Jesus, leaving out anything smacking of the supernatural or superstitious. He colorfully described the process in a letter to John Adams as follows. In the New Testament, there is internal evidence that parts of it have proceeded from an extraordinary man, and that other parts are the fabric of very inferior minds. It is easy to separate those parts as to pick out diamonds from dunghills. After cutting out the parts that he thought worthy, he pasted together an 84-page new version that he titled The Life and Morals of Jesus of Nazareth. The original has been preserved and you can buy a copy online. There are a number of editions available. In the privacy of his letters, he would also make statements that were and are scandalous to those of Orthodox Christian belief. He advised his nephew, fix reason firmly in her seat and call to her tribunal every fact, every opinion. Question with boldness even the existence of God, because if there be one, he must more approve of the homage of reason than that of blindfolded fear. He went on to note that there was much that was obviously false in many parts of the Bible. More recently, about 50 years ago, there were the God is dead theologians of the 1960s. Leading to the famous cover, Is God Dead? In 2002, the New Zealand theologian Lloyd Guerin published a book entitled Christianity Without God. He was brought up on heresy charges in 1967 for his ideas by the Presbyterian Church of Australia and New Zealand, but prevailed at his heresy trial. In 2014, Daniel Maguire, an ex-Jesuit priest and longtime professor of theology at Marquette University, a Catholic school, published another book by the same name, Christianity Without God. I've not read Gehring's book, but I have read McGuire's. He divides his book into 4 parts. In part 1, he argues why there is no supernatural God of any kind. Part 2 is dedicated to his view that Jesus was just a human. In part 3, he breaks the news that there is no afterlife. Provocatively, and I think accurately, he explains that the loss of hope for an afterlife is actually a good thing. Why? Because belief in an afterlife deadens the social conscience in the present with a hope for a sweet by and by in the hereafter. It makes our experience of this life just a prologue to an eventual eternity in a fun paradise. It disconnects humanity from the earth, makes us strangers to this paradise. McGuire notes that if humans have an afterlife and the plants and animals do not, we are not their kin, nor do we share their perils. The hubris of immortality also offers immunity from cosmic fate. Continuing in McGuire's words, when our solar star reaches the red star end of its days, and Earth with all its contents is returned to its primeval stardust, immortal humans merely look on from their zone of imagined otherness of being and watch the cataclysmic show. McGuire's view on the effects of afterlife belief are confirmed by my own research. I spent 2 years, from mid-2016 to mid-2018, spending hundreds of hours with evangelicals. The most shocking finding is how completely indifferent they are to the climate change and other forms of environmental harm. They are going to heaven. They are proud of how much they do not care about the long-term health of this planet. The rapture could happen any minute, and God has promised to destroy this planet and make a new one. See 2 Peter 3:10. Why would anyone care about the fate of this planet, in their view? In his final section, McGuire lays out what he thinks Christianity should be once a supernatural, all-powerful God, a magically divine Jesus, and a hope-for afterlife have been removed. The part worth keeping, in his view, is the Exodus narrative's promise of freedom for the oppressed. In his final paragraph, he argues that by putting aside the Bible's jumbled theism, we gain access to a trove of power-making symbols that imagine a humanity that can break chains, part waters, and start out into the desert of uncharted healing possibilities. He explains that the symbols of resurrection and transfiguration were not events, but poetic envisionings of human potential to make a new heaven and a new earth, to break the grip of what seemed inexorable fate, to see paradise not as lost, but as awaiting our discovery. These poetic symbols, says McGuire, have no need of a supernatural superbeing who is the way, the truth, and the life. Instead, it is for us to find the way, embrace truth, whether hard or exhilarating, and serve life as no species in the rest of nature can. But he was a tenured theologian within the safety of academia's ivory tower. He has since retired. Open Christian atheism is a rare thing among parish pastors. Indeed, I know of only one, Greta Vosper, a United Church of Canada pastor in the suburbs of Toronto. In 2001, she, in her language, came out to her congregation that she no longer believed in God and was in fact an atheist. She lost about a third of her congregation, but the other 2/3 stuck by her. Then in 2003, she stopped using the Lord's Prayer in worship service and lost another 2/3 of her membership. A small group continued to stick with her, and now her numbers have returned to close to their original size. United Church of Canada members outside her particular congregation, however, started agitating that she be defrocked and prohibited from leading a church. After years of procedural skirmishes, the national church leadership abandoned their efforts to defrock her, and she continues her unique atheistic Christian ministry. I had found my way to a form of Christian atheism long before I'd ever heard of Daniel McGuire or Greta Vosper, but I resonate with much of what they have set forth. The Christian atheism I developed is compatible yet somewhat different. To be Christian, Christian atheism needs, in my view, to be grounded in the Bible. I argue that a biblical foundation for Christian atheism can be found, and that the first such text is found in the Apostle Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, the oldest book in the New Testament and the first of the genuine letters of Paul, written long before any of the Gospels. There, Paul admonishes the church he is writing to as follows: "Do not despise the words of prophets, but test everything. Hold fast to what is good. Abstain from every form of evil." So, test everything, Paul tells us. In his last authentic letter, his epistle to the Romans, he declares this: "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of those who by their wickedness suppress the truth. For what can be known about God is plain to them, because God has shown it to them. Ever since the creation of the world, his eternal power and divine nature, invisible though they are, have been understood and seen through the things he has made. So they are without excuse." Paul is here attempting to argue that everybody knows there is a God because everybody has seen the cosmos created by God. And significantly, for my argument, Paul says that the reality of God is shown by studying the things he has made. This verse was used by Thomas Aquinas in the 13th century to kick off the natural theology tradition, whereby the nature of God was discovered by studying the natural order. How times change. Today, the close study of things made reveal that they were made by the Big Bang and by laws of evolution embedded along with the laws of physics, chemistry, and biology into the very nature of reality. When we test everything, it is the traditional anthropomorphic, human-created deity of Judaism and Christianity that must, by Paul's own command, be jettisoned. The Christian tradition declares, "You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free." Free from what? Free, upon close scientific inspection and study, from illusion and falsehood. It is not exactly where either Paul or the community that drafted the gospel and 3 epistles attributed to John thought their ideas would lead. But here we are. We now have information and scientific evidence that neither Paul or the Johannine community could have ever imagined. And these new scientific understandings of the cosmos have totally overturned earlier understandings of the divine. A final question: does Christian atheism extend beyond a few theologians and one congregation and one pastor in her congregation near Toronto? The data is sketchy. But I know that there are rank and file church members that are also atheists, because I have met them. While I was doing my research on progressive Christian churches, I talked with one woman at a church potluck who confided that she was an atheist. Because we had just attended the same service, which was saturated with traditional Christian language and ritual, I asked her how she knew it was safe to be an atheist in that church. She said it was because she stayed for coffee hour afterward and found that there were a lot of atheists in that church. a fact acknowledged by the head pastor when I interviewed him later. Indeed, he reported that the overwhelming majority of his members thought of Jesus not as an incarnated God, but as an awesome social justice prophet in the mold of the prophets of ancient Judaism, like Amos and Hosea. If this prophetic social justice Jesus was not revealed in the Gospels, I would have no interest in Christianity. But that Jesus is there in the text, as Christopher reminds us week after week. Incredible scholarship shows this Jesus as the one that is most historically likely. My favorite example is found in the Gospel that the evolving tradition eventually called Matthew. When the Son of Man comes, he will say to those at the right, "You may remember, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a foreigner and you showed me hospitality. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you came to see me." Then the virtuous will say to him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you a drink? When did we notice that you were a foreigner and extended hospitality to you? Or naked and clothe you? When did we find you ill or in prison and come to visit you?" And the king will respond to them, "I swear to you, whatever you did for the most inconspicuous members of my family, you did for me as well." The Christian tradition declares that work on behalf of the oppressed is work for the divine in all. Indeed, the sacred is most fully present among the oppressed. That Christian ideal is worth retaining, even as atheists let supernatural gods fall by the wayside. Discuss amongst yourselves.
And when I first met you, when we were talking similar about Christopher's scripture of the day, I introduced myself to you as an agnostic Christian. And you said, "Oh, I'm an atheist Christian," and I've never heard anyone say that before. And I guess my comment, I don't know if it's a question or not, is I don't have the faith that you have to move and call myself an atheist Christian, that I am really indebted that you opened up this pathway and this conversation. And maybe someday I'll have as much faith as you. If not, I'm very pleased and honored to be part of this congregation.
Yeah, there certainly were times when I would have thought of myself as an agnostic Christian as well. And it, ultimately it was just my own deepening knowledge of biology, astrophysics, and study of other religions that moved me into a more atheistic position. Anyone else have anything to share? Denise.
Well, a lot of what you spoke about really resonated with me in terms of being out in nature and embracing science. And as a younger person, I attended various churches on into my childhood, on into my first marriage, and then the freight train of the rest of my life. And I was occasionally extremely, it was hard for me to wrap my head around, the ego of the minister or the person that was talking to us, and the inhumanity of some of the I have so much respect for someone who will acknowledge that there's problems with Christianity and whether they're evangelical or not, but a church that isn't even discussing our current crises that we face is really hard for me to swallow, hook, line, and sinker. But what I appreciated, and I always sort of identified as an agnostic, only because I didn't want to offend my Christian friends and family, because I don't want to put them down or tell them you're full of beans. And, it's like, seems like a contradiction in terms, but it's very much, it's a Christ-like embracing of what probably Christianity was meant to be or should be. But I also acknowledge that the world is huge and we're so self-absorbed that there's other faiths, and to put them down as this is the way, the only way, the right one, and everyone else is wrong, and we're built, it doesn't flow with me. So I appreciate everything that you have discussed, and apparently I have some reading to do.
Anyone else? And then you. Go ahead.
I was wondering if you could talk for a moment about how does the concept of faith fit into an atheist or agnostic Christian?
Well, I think that one way you could, everybody has faith in something. Atheists, people of either are hardcore atheists or atheistic in their orientation, tend to have a faith in the scientific method, and that there's faith that we as humans actually have developed techniques of investigation that have demonstrated themselves to be reliable. And people that are atheistic tend not to want to make leaps of faith into saying, well, I don't have any evidence for this thing I want to believe, but I'll just have faith it's true. Now, some people argue that's the best kind of knowledge, is the knowledge you just leap into without any evidence. A lot of evangelicals would extol that. But it varies. They also will say that they have the true science and denigrate anything that those atheistic scientists up at UCSC have to say. And so they grapple with their issues of trying to buttress up and build up the justifications for their belief systems in a whole host of ways. You can spend a lifetime studying the many ways they do it.
I just wanted to say I found your talk very interesting, and I thank you for talking about the Jefferson Bible, because I hadn't heard of that before, and it's something I'm interested in looking into.
Cool. I was wondering, how many people knew about the Jefferson Bible?
No clue.
Mike says he knew, Cameron knows. But it was my sense is it's kind of a lesser known thing that Jefferson did. He didn't, he created the Bible 6 years before he died, during his long retirement at Monticello. So in some circles, I think it's widely known. Among Unitarian Universalists, everybody knows about the Jefferson Bible, but I think in the larger culture, it is far less known. Anyone else? Christopher, I'll turn it back over to you.
That was so interesting. I love listening to Bernie talk. Listen to Bernie. If I had an audiobook, like an 8-hour audiobook of Bernie talking, I would not get bored at all. This is amazing. Yes. Next Christmas, we know what I'm getting. Like listening to Bernie talk, it reminded me of when I met Allie. I didn't tell Allie that I was a pastor because, like Bernie was talking about, most pastors have a very different view of Scripture, at least than I do personally. And we're meeting up at a place down at the parish pub. There was an event there, so we couldn't get a seat. So I was like, hey, we can ride down to the barbecue place down the street. You can jump in my car, I'll drive you. And Allie gets into the car, and she looks at my rearview mirror, and she sees like 20 crucifixes hanging from my mirror. Now, the reason they were there is people assume that I love crucifixes because I'm a pastor. I actually don't like them. I think it's a bad symbol for the church because it's like an execution chair that you're just adorning around your neck. But I love the people that give them to me, so I was like, I'm not going to wear it, but I'll keep it in my car. So she's staring, like horrified, because Allie was not anywhere near a churchgoer when we met. And she's mortified, and I come into the car and I see that she's very upset. And she was like, oh my God, are you religious? I was like, I was like, hell no. But I am a pastor. And then I thought she would like laugh about that. I thought she would see the humor in it. She didn't. She still doesn't know I'm hilarious. Like, we've been together for a while. She'll figure it out one
Nobody
day.
does.
She'll figure it out one day. I'm hysterical. But over time, Allie identified as agnostic, but she actually calls herself a follower of Christ, and she still identifies as agnostic as far as her beliefs about the afterlife and anything divine. But she does find power in this way of life that Christ exuded and that is palpable in the New Testament. And Bernie said something yesterday that just really stuck with me today. The closer you get to theological Jesus, the further away you get from historical Jesus. There's this belief that Jesus was, here to save us all from eternal damnation, and there's heaven and hell. Like Bernie said, many Christians don't believe there's any point in trying to restore the earth and trying to fight for justice, because God's going to come back and do all of that for us. That's actually really bad theology, and it's really bad history. Early Christians and ancient Jewish folks believed that they were part of the process in restoring the earth. That they were responsible for dragging that reality of heaven, whatever heaven is, if there is a heaven in the afterlife, dragging that ideal future into the present and bringing heaven to earth. So fighting for justice, feeding the poor, taking care of your neighbor, putting others above yourself. This was paramount in Christianity. Now, Bernie and I, and even my wife and I, we would disagree on the existence of the divine, and that's okay. And that's why I love what Bernie talked about today. It's fine. It's fine, because ultimately, I don't think Jesus gave a shit about what people believe. I think he cared about what people do. And that is the ethos that we need to have at this church. We can come to the table with different beliefs. That's okay. Our identity is in our actions. One of the things that I find beautiful about communion is how subversive the whole thing was to begin with. Jesus, from my understanding, knew that Jesus was going to die, knew that Jesus was going to be executed by Rome, and gathered this group of followers together for a Passover meal and used these elements to symbolize death and the passing of the torch. I'm going to die. This is my body, broken for you. Jesus talked about eating the body and drinking the blood. It wasn't like a cannibalistic invitation. Like Jesus was like, hey, be the next, Hannibal Lecter. Jesus was saying, you get to do what I did because my journey stops here. Bernie pointed out something very interesting to me the other day, and I was just like mind blown, which I was this entire presentation. Do you remember the story where Jesus started throwing shit in the temple and started, throwing money changers out and really standing up to the injustice that was in the temple at that time? So those animals that were there that Jesus set free, there was doves, and there was lambs. Only the rich people could afford the nice animals to sacrifice. Poor people were sacrificing doves and things like that. They couldn't afford to sacrifice the really quality animals. So it was a really unjust economic system in the temple at that time. What Jesus did with these elements is took something that was on everyone's table at the time. Everyone had bread, everyone had wine. It was a way to fight the corruption within religious institution. It was a way to bring equality and tear down the hierarchy that was being promoted by systems of governance and system of religion. That is some subversive, badass stuff, y'all. That's awesome. Today, I want to invite us to remember that this is the lifestyle that Jesus invites us into. A lifestyle of questioning and a lifestyle of standing up for others and against ignorance and against stupid. When you take the bread and when you drink the wine, you are committing yourself to bringing justice to the oppressed and bringing compassion to the marginalized. That's what you're saying you're going to do. So in that knowledge, take the bread at your table, pass it around, and just hold the bread in your hands like this. Take the bread and just hold it. Don't eat it. Just keep it in your hands. And there's going to be a cup scattered about in the room. You want to take the cup and pass it to your neighbor. You're serving each other communion. One of the problems in the church is a system of hierarchy where clergy serves the people. You all are no less spiritually significant than anyone in front of you on Sunday mornings. You serve each other. Be priests to one another. And pass the cup around, and when it comes your way, dip the bread into the cup and take these elements. And in so doing, no matter what you believe, whether you're a Christian, a pagan, an atheist, a Christian atheist, whatever your identity is, it doesn't matter. What matters is the difference we make the moment we walk out those doors. Amen?
Amen.
And until next week, may the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever it may send you. May it guide you through the wilderness and protect you through the storms. May it bring you home rejoicing at the wonders that it shows you, and may it bring you home rejoicing once again into our doors. Grace and peace to you. I love y'all. See you next week.